Waiters slash waitresses of Reddit, what's the most awkward first date you had to witness firsthand? Not awkward but just fun. I used to work at a sushi restaurant in Anchorage, and there was a girl who would come about once every few weeks with a different guy. Every single time, she ordered a huebop, which is like a rice salad sashimi bowl, and it was giant. I've only ever seen a handful of people ever finish the entire thing in one sitting. She would finish the whole thing, with chopsticks, and always ask for a spoon towards the end. It was fun watching all the guys look stunned when she finished. One day she came with this dude that ordered what she did, and when they both finished the bowl, they ordered another and split it. Wish they had ended up together, but she came back with a different guy a couple weeks later. Edit, she never paid lol. I worked as a barista at a coffee shop with a dishwashing sink that brought you face to face with whoever was sitting at the coffee bar across from you. For some reason, so many people chose this spot for their first dates, so I would have to wash dishes and pretend I wasn't literally on the date with them. One time a person I knew was on their first date with someone and chose that cursed seat across for the dishwashing sink. Because we knew each other, we chatted a little bit, and then, as if a partition raised between us, they began their date. But I still had dishes to do. So fucking uncomfortable. Declined? The date pays. The guy's card declines. I didn't want to embarrass him, so I waved him over near the credit card machine so it would look like he needed to go to the bathroom. He told me to try it again, and I assumed he was going to move money over on his app. He went back to his date. Card declines again. The machine prints a receipt that states the reason for decline. Insufficient funds. I keep trying 4 more times. I go over to the table and say I'm having an issue with the card, might be our machine, do you have another? I walk away with the new card, and it declines. I wave him over. He gets up angrily, and I'm guessing now the date has caught on. He proceeds to berate me, saying that it must be our machines because he knows he has money. He starts making fun of me, questioning if I know what I'm doing. He is doing this in front of his date, I'm guessing to save face. Gives me another card. My parents had a payment mix-up on their first date, too. Unlike in your story, it was an honest misunderstanding. This happened in the 80s when not every restaurant took credit cards, and you couldn't take your ATM card to another bank's machine. Step 1. Dad has a certain restaurant in mind, which takes cards. Step 2. Mom suggests a different restaurant she's been meaning to try, and they go there instead. Step 3. They realize after they've ordered that this place is cash only. Step 4. They find out the closest ATM is at a bank where my dad doesn't have an account, but my mom does. Step 5. Dad spends 15 minutes pretending he's just thinking really hard about this dessert menu, while mom jogs 2 blocks in high heels to an ATM that will take her card, gets the cash, and comes back to pay for dinner on a first date. Mind you, Dad is all for gender equality, but he promised to pay and had to renege because of this mix-up. He was mortified. Anyway, they've been happily married 33 years now. Mom tells that story as a firm example of why you should be willing to give people second chances. I had these 2 people that were there on a first date. After the appetizers, this poor man got the shits and was going back and forth to the bathroom all night. There was only a few other people in the restaurant at the time, so it was noticeable, and they were chuckling every time he got up. I honestly felt so bad for the guy. I was the one on the first date. Went to a bar with this guy. Our waitress came up and immediately recognized him, was super friendly, took our orders and left. While she was gone he told me they used to date. The rest of the night they openly flirted with each other. There was no second date. Edit, thanks for the award, kind stranger. Edit, 2, wow. This is the most awards I've received, thank you all. Lady comes in to get a table, says she's expecting a man and gives us a brief description. He shows up about 10 minutes later and she starts saying she knew it. He looks very surprised and scared. I took a drink order and when I get back they are gone. The hostess fills me in that in my absence they had a heated but civil exchange. The man was married to the lady's cousin, also the lady was married. Apparently they had been texting for a while after meeting via Craigslist personals. I'm assuming the married but looking section. Don't know if they hooked up in the end or just called the whole thing off. At my place we had the opposite. A young in shape really handsome dude from Spain would be in 3 to 4 times a week with a new older woman. The women would be buying him everything and basically swooning over him. He'd always walk up to pay with a little smirk while she would be paying for everything. He did this for years. I worked at a bar, where like 50% of our business was from Tinder dates. This one time, 2 guys came in separately and sat at different tables by themselves, along the same wall. They were both facing the door and clearly waiting for dates. Eventually a woman comes in, walks up to the closest guy, sits down and they start chatting. They start ordering drinks. After 5 minutes, the other guy, who is still waiting by himself, gets up and walks over to the couple. He says hi to the girl and is like, aren't you so-and-so? I'm so-and-so, we were supposed to be meeting. She was clearly flustered, lots of awkward laughter, and she gets up and goes with the other guy to the other table. Couple minutes later the other woman shows up and sits with first guy and he tells her all about it. Lol. I'm curious how they made this mistake. Did the guys look similar? Or the women, for that matter? It was 5 years ago, so I don't really remember details. The guys were both generic-looking white dudes. The women looked less similar. I think instead of walking up and introducing herself, she just said hi and sat down. Maybe was like, this dude doesn't look like his picture or something lamau. All I remember for certain is that she was definitely on the wrong date at first. Just saw one on Valentine's Day. The date seemed to be going very well, actually, not awkward at all. They talked non-stop, no lulls in conversation, they were laughing, carrying on, and just generally having a good time. In fact, another server and I were laughing about how obnoxiously loud they were. Then I heard the gentleman say, "And obviously you're not still married. Right? Please tell me you're not still married," she said. "Well, actually." And then things got very uncomfortable. It must not have been a deal breaker, because they stayed at the restaurant another hour until we closed, but they were very quiet for the rest of the night. Hardly spoke to each other at all. I worked at a higher-end restaurant as a busser for a while, and eventually was given a chance to serve in the bar area while a jazz band played. Most of the tables were just drinks and appetizers. My first shift, a woman in her 40s or 50s came in with a tall, dark, and handsome guy no older than 30. Nothing wrong with that in my eyes, but all of my interaction with them was the woman talking down to me on some sort of power trip, maybe to prove to her guy that she's an alpha female or something, to know, and her ordering everything for her date. They had cocktails, ordered a bottle of wine, and had a couple entrees. She ordered tuna, rare. She was very insistent on the rare, so much so that I put blue rare into the computer so everything would be fine. She sent back 4 separate plates, all too well done, to the absolute horror of her date. I informed her after the second that they wouldn't be taken off her bill, and she scoffed and made some comment about how she's loaded and it doesn't matter. After the 4 plates, she sent the last one back and asked for a shrimp cocktail instead. I left them to enjoy the music, brought the check, and when I came back to pick it up, her date was gone, and I don't mean, went to the bathroom or went for a smoke. All of his things were gone and he was nowhere to be seen for 30 minutes. She apologized to me and asked if I could take the tuna, $1.45 each, off of her bill. Told her to pound dirt. Not really, but my manager did. Next day she wrote a 500-word review about me, using my first name, on the restaurant's Facebook page. My boss printed it out, framed it, and I still have it today. Edit, spacing. Not a first date, but a guy decided to propose to a stripper from Scores, high-end joint in NYC. She was stunning. Also in fine dining, he gets on one knee and pops the question and she goes out loud, "Are you fucking kidding me?" He got up and asked for the check. Edit, can't spell. At the end of the meal, after appetizers, 2 of the most expensive entrees, a high-priced bottle of wine, and dessert with a bottle of Dom, the man says to me, in front of his date, "Hey man, we are on a first date. What more can I do to guarantee I get laid tonight?" The young lady turned deep red with her jaw dropped open. I sat down the bill and said, after asking me that, "There is nothing you can do." As a bartender, my personal favorite was one where the guy showed up to meet a girl, but left with another dude. The 2 people on the date showed up separately, had a cutely awkward first few minutes, and things went business as usual for about the first 30 minutes or so. Then a guy, let's call him Frank, shows up and happens to sit at the bar stool next to the dude on the date. Frank is a bro. Like a bro. Like put a Kyle in a coma for 15 years and see what he's like when he wakes up, bro. I'm not totally sure how this happened, but Frank and date guy start chatting and within minutes are full-blown broing out. The rest of the date was largely the girl looking at her phone while date guy and Frank had the time of their lives. On one hand I felt bad for her, but on the other I was watching a best friendship form in real time, and it was kind of hard to be mad at that. After finishing her meal, the girl said goodbye and got an Uber home, but date guy could not have been less fazed. He and Frank hung out drinking together until closing time and helped hold each other up on the walk/stumble out the door. Horribly awkward, pretty rude to the girl, but goddamn was it pure. Edit, well shit, I entirely missed this blowing up. Glad that y'all enjoyed it. Not a first date, but when I first started bartending I had a woman, who was very obviously stood up. She got there, ordered a drink, and would look around every once in a while. I saw her use her phone a couple times and her mood just got sadder until she finally put her phone upside down on the bar and ordered food an hour later. I wiped what I could off her bill, then paid the rest myself, told her it was on the house. In my career it's happened 2 more times, once with another woman and once with a guy. I did the same thing. Nothing sucks more than eating alone and defeated. Edit, thank you for the upvotes and nice comments. Made my night smile. Edit 2, seriously guys, you're so sweet. NGL today was kind of rough, but everyone has brightened it so much. I really appreciate it. Man, thank you. I got stood up and literally as soon as I put my card down to pay my bill, my date walked in. Drunk? Quickly said hi to me, then went over to the other side of the bar where he made out with another person. He then waddled over and asked me to join them on the other side of the bar. Like, no. There and then just dipped out. Kinda funny, kinda awkward, but that's what you get for dine and dash. Edit 1, since this is asked about multiple times, when the bar was in dining hours crowds were usually very manageable. We didn't take CCs, we would just give the bill at the end of the meal. Similar to a traditional restaurant. They waited for the later crowd to show up around 9 and dipped while we were getting busier. That's the whole reason they weren't caught trying to leave the bar in the first place. Edit 2, thanks for the upvotes and award. Much appreciated. Edit 3, the girl wasn't a willing participant from what I could tell. She had no idea he had dined and dashed. I think she had gone to the restroom or something at some point, so he could have said, "Oh, I got it." Or something along those lines. Worked at a pub connected to a brewery in college. Dude comes in with a stunning woman, I mean she's absolutely gorgeous. Whole time they're sitting at the end of the bar, and you can hear the guy talking about how he has a room for them next door at the hotel in downtown. So they decide to go to the brewery next door, gonna pull a little dine and dash. They got over there and didn't realize we are on the same system, so he orders a couple of beers, and the bartender on the brewery side asks if he wants to add it to his tab. He looks over confused and says, "What tab? I've never been here." She prints off the restaurant bill plus his brewery tab, it's like $80 or so. He just blankly stares at the poor bartender, flies off the handle. The girl he was with ended up paying for it. They walked across the street and to the hotel, he has already invited her up. She stalls until her Uber gets. In what world does a dine and dash ever sound like a good idea, but especially when on a date? Especially when you are going to dash next door. Regardless of if the establishments are connected in any financial way. I have definitely texted other bartenders in the area to let them know if something sketchy is going on. Finding a dine and dasher in a bar next door would be really easy. She started yelling at him about how he should have ordered for her. I don't get this mentality. Even among women who prefer the guy always pays, not my thing, but sure. I've never seen this but only heard about it rarely. I think the idea is they want a decisive guy to order for her, but what the hell? Make a decision, or tell me what you want to order. Don't expect the male to literally do things for you, and get mad when he doesn't. So weird. There was a lady in my section who was by herself. She was just waiting. This lady was absolutely gorgeous and dressed to kill. I ended up talking to her a bit since she was obviously bored. She was smart and seemed like she had a good sense of humor. It turned out she was there to meet some guy on a blind date. I was like, holy crap, what kind of asshole would leave a woman like this waiting? A complete douche as it turned out. The guy eventually rolled in looking like a crunchy bro. This was a fine dining restaurant, and acting as if he was just too cute. Apparently the woman confronted him about his being late because he actually got on top of the table and asked everyone in the restaurant if they thought she should forgive him or not. Everyone ignored the guy. I think one guy said, "Get off that table, dude." They talked for a bit, and then the guy went to the bathroom. I went up to the table and said, "You don't need to pay for your drinks or anything. If you want to leave, you can just leave. She said thanks, but she ended up going ahead with the date. They left my section and went somewhere else. Honestly, the thought that that guy actually got away with cringe-inducing stunt disappointed me. I wanted her to ditch the guy so bad. I was working at a high-end steakhouse when a couple comes in on a first date. The man was really friendly and seemed like he knew his wine. He orders a nice and fairly expensive bottle. As I'm presenting the bottle, the woman's phone rings and she answers. Apparently, her close friend just broke up with her boyfriend, and is distraught. The woman asks if her friend can join them for dinner. The man says of course and is really gracious about the whole thing. The friend shows up within a few minutes, and is a crying, hot mess. I bring the friend an empty glass, and before I can pour it, the first woman grabs the bottle and fills the glass to the brim, then requests another bottle. After I open the second bottle, the man excuses himself to the restroom. While he is away, I overhear the friend expressing concern about the menu prices. The first woman then says, "Get whatever you want, I'm not going to ever see this loser again." So then I catch the man coming out of the bathroom and tell him what I just heard. He says, "What do I do?" I tell him he is welcome to leave through the delivery door in the back and I will play dumb for his date. The guy expresses his gratitude and slips me $100 on his way out. The woman becomes increasingly irate as the night goes on and she realizes the man isn't coming back to buy them food. She waits until closing time before settling the alcohol tab and leaving hungry in a taxi. I wasn't a waiter here, but I happened to be nosy. Went with my friend to this Italian place we used to go to all the time in high school, and this single guy comes in and sits down at a table for two and looks around and at his phone like he's waiting for someone. At this point, I'm not paying really attention, but he orders 2 glasses of wine. About 10 minutes later I'm halfway through my meal and his date, or who I assume was his date, finally arrives and sits down without saying a word, and neither does he. BTW, I'm not watching their every move, I can just kinda see them when I stare straight ahead. As far as I can tell, after 5 minutes they've said nothing and just drank their glasses of wine. As high schoolers do, my friend and I started coming up with possibilities of what this could be, whether a first date gone horrible wrong or something. I mean, these 220 heads or tails of whatever the hell is going on. All in all, I guess they were made for each other. They then ordered dessert, some sort of tiramisu, and ate it with forks. TLDR couple comes into fancy Italian restaurant, and don't talk at all, guy starts eating ravioli with his hands, girl looks like she's having a terrible time, then starts also eating ravioli with her hands. Couple stay for dessert. Love wins. Some things were sitting and eating like old people do when they've run out of things to talk about after being married for 40+ years. Anyways, they both order ravioli. It comes out wickedly fast and almost immediately, this guy starts to eat it with his hands. Now, I'm really paying attention. By now, they have exchanged a few words, but with completely blank faces. Absolutely no idea what they could have been talking about, but the woman hasn't touched her food at all, and this guy's licking all the sauce off his fingers one after another. Something like 10 minutes went by and the woman still hasn't touched her food. My friend and I are convinced that this woman is trapped on the worst date of her life, when suddenly, she also begins to eat with her hands, and grabs a huge ravioli and sucks it down with sauce all over the place. My friend and I are stunned. We can't make. I legit saw the guy try to roofie the girl. Like, not even trying to be hidden about it. He did it right in front of me. The girl went to the bathroom and I was cleaning the table next to them. I saw him take the powder out and slip it inside the drink. Another thing too, it was a pizza place. Who tries to roofie someone in a pizza place? Edit, yes, I called the cops. Jesus, I like chaos, but I'm not an animal. Apparently a high school classmate of mine did this, or rather, tried to a coworker. Bartender also noticed, warned the girl, and the girl acted normal to stall him till the cops got there. I wonder if he's in jail yet. Of the few times I was really happy, my father was a sheriff's deputy. Called, told him what was up, and the guy got arrested and charged. Later my dad told me they circled the block and ignored my coworkers beating the guy. She ended up okay. Turned out the creep had told her that I had said I hated driving her home. I do not tolerate people abusing people. I dealt with that shit all my childhood. I worked with a guy years back who pulled that shit with a coworker. After we got off a closing shift, one of us would go and grab a case of beer and a group of us would hang out and have a beer or two while we about our day. We had some older creep who went off one day to buy the beer and hands one of the girls an open beer as soon as she walked up. The beer had already been opened and he kept it aside from the case. I usually gave her a ride home, and the creep had told me earlier in the day that she had asked him to give her a ride home. When she told me she didn't feel good and asked if I could drive her home, he immediately started saying he was leaving and would do it. Nope. I took her straight to the hospital, and as soon as she blacked out I called one of the guys I knew was still there and told them not to let Mr. Creep leave, as I was calling the cops. It was honestly one. At the end of the dinner, two couples on a double date dine and dash. I chased them down, and the girls had no clue. Their dates had told them they already paid. The girls ended paying, the guys had no cash. I worked at a restaurant in high school, along with a number of classmates. A group of 4 people that we all knew came in to eat, then left without paying. We just gave the manager their home phone numbers so she could speak with their parents. A girl from my HS called me one day and asked who a kid from the crosstown school was. I played football, wrestled, and grew up with him, so I was able to get it off her rough description, and jog her memory. Him and his buddy, who I also identified, had dined and dashed at the Mongolian Grill across from the HS. I wandered over again, and asked if he'd like to look at a food menu, perhaps munch on something while he waited. He declined, and glanced at his watch again. I made a comment about his watch and how I appreciated his use of analog technology, and he laughed nervously and said he didn't want to pull out or use his phone during his date, because he didn't want to seem disingenuous. How cute. Another 30 minutes pass, and my high-strung hopeful was still alone. I asked if he'd changed his mind about some food, and he merely shook his head, defeated. I'll just finish my beer and go. I'm sorry I wasted one of your tables. On his last swig of beer, a cute-looking girl walked in, eyeing the room, obviously looking for someone. Chelsea. Over here. He started to stand, grin from ear to ear. The entrance was near my drink well, which I had just happened to be standing in. This night? I was a bartender at a local place that was somewhat close to the university, but far enough away that it was a hidden gem. We used to get first dates all the time, most of them were Tinder-esque. I remember one time specifically, this guy comes in and sits down at a table alone, and kept checking his watch. A watch. I wander over, greet him, and ask what he'd like to start off with to drink. I dunno, I'm meeting someone. is it rude to have a drink already before they get here? I smiled, asked if he was waiting for a date, he said yes, and I suggested a beer to sip on instead of a mixed drink. It might calm his nerves a bit, but won't get him inebriated too quickly so he could enjoy his date. He agreed, apologized profusely for bothering me, which, he hadn't bothered me at all, and continued to wait. After about 20 minutes of him waiting, and him checking his watch every 5 was particularly quiet, and the acoustics allow me to hear chitter-chatter in the entryway, curved ceilings, I look over to the girl after seeing my hopeful's eyes light up, and she had a disgusted look of, damn it in her face. She rolled her eyes and made contact with mine, sighed, and said, "Are you fucking kidding me with this guy?" Screwed on her fake smile, and immediately sat down, avoiding a half-hug attempt by my hopeful. The entire date felt forced. Every time I went to check on them, she was ordering another drink, and he was doing his best to try and pull conversation from this girl, who had her face in her phone the entire time. About an hour later, I watched the girl get up with her purse, announce that she had to use the restroom, and wandered away towards the restrooms. I immediately went over to my hopeful to ask how his date was going. "I don't think she likes me." He trailed off. I gave him a pat on the shoulder, and said it looked to me like he was doing everything right. He smiled, thanked me, and I went back to my bar. The girl never came back. He footed her tab. $90 worth of drinks, his 2 beers were $8. He continued to come back as a regular, and I became his wing woman. I eventually set up Mr. Hopeful with Ms. Lonely Heart. They're still together. Edit, spelling. Edit 2, I was not anticipating such an interest in Mr. Hopeful and Ms. Lonely Heart, but I will gladly tell what I know of their story. I'm at work currently, and I'd like to give the same amount of effort to put into their story, as I did initially, so I will definitely post when I get home a little later. Thank you all for the awards. Edit 3, Ms. Lonely Heart's story is in its own comment below, along with how she and Mr. Hopeful met. You all are lovely, I'm so happy I could share with you. I'd like to hear the story of Mr. Hopeful and MS Lonely Heart. There isn't a someone for everyone, friends and sometimes, that isn't the way that it ends. Some people embark on their journey alone and others are perfectly fine on their own. There isn't some magical pairing of hearts a soul that's divided in multiple parts 2 halves of a person that wished on a star. But sometimes, just sometimes, I think that there are. At a restaurant I worked at, there was a white guy and a black guy on a first date. They were sitting in a booth and having a good time. White guy gets up to go to the bathroom. When he came back he sat in the wrong booth with a different black guy. Took him a minute to realize it was a different person. The person he was on a date with was not happy at all. They tried to salvage the date, but it didn't work. A few years ago, while working in Studio City in a pretty nice restaurant/bar, we encountered a legend. Not a good legend. But his shit was legendary. So it starts, with a guy walking up to our host stand and telling our host he's here for a date and needs a table for 2. He came alone, guess he wanted to get there early and scope it out. The host seats him and it's a really quiet day. Literally only 5 tables actively dining. As he sits there waiting, one of my co-workers comes up to me and says, "Isn't that the guy from Burbank?" Yes. Yes, it was that motherfucker from Burbank. This guy has been known to meet up with women online, take them to a nice restaurant, run up the bill, and then bounce out of there, leaving these women, sometimes in tears, with a hefty bill. We have industry friends in Burbank who saw it happen in their restaurant and told us. Motherfucker was so legendary. Didn't happen to me, but I was working while the bartender got to experience it. Guy and girl came in, super weird chemistry all night. The guy is obviously trying to impress her by being a huge douche, and she looks like she's just pretending to not hate it so the date will end faster. At the end of the night, she says she'll take an Uber home and he awkwardly leaves without her. She then waits for the bartender to come back over, orders another cocktail, and asks for his phone number. Sitting together and chatting and having drinks. Apparently it was a great night and most of them kept in touch. 3 of them even went on vacation together in Europe. I'll always wonder if Alex, or whatever his real name was there to notice it all, or knows how his prank ended up turning. Edit, words, can't write for shit. Edit 2, everyone saying Alex was the bar owner or the bartender. It most probably wasn't. This was an ancient old-timers bar where the owner, who's also the bartender, probably didn't own a cell phone, and where they had car and motorcycle meetups every summer. There was nothing hip about it. Not a waiter, but a girl I met on a dating app a couple years back told me this guy, who she also met on said dating app, set a date at this weird unknown ghetto bar in our town, and while the place seemed bad, the guy seemed cool, so she ended up going. She gets there early and sits down at the table. Guy isn't there yet. She notices there are 2 other girls, also alone and on their phone, sitting separately. As the time goes on, more and more single girls start walking in and sitting alone. At this point, the guy is late by 15 minutes. After 30 minutes, she stands up and asks one of the girls, "Sorry, are you waiting for Alex?" The girl surprisingly says yeah. Another one must have heard the conversation because she stood up and said, "Hey, I'm also waiting for Alex." Turns out Alex had managed to invite 12 girls at the same bar at the same time, clearly as a prank. They ended up all. Maybe Alex was one of the girls, and she just wanted some girlfriends. Or Alex worked at the bar and was trying to stir up business. Edit, for people thinking this is a good idea, if you try this, people will figure it out, and nobody, even people who don't hate you for this, will ever try to plan a date at your bar again for fear people will think it's a setup. I waited on a couple who were clearly on a first date, and the lady was clearly not impressed by the guy she was on the date with. The date was over quick enough and the guy paid, leaving me a 5% tip. The next day, the lady came into the restaurant, walked up to me, said that was the worst first date I've ever been on, and I was mortified when he stiffed you on the tip and then handed me $20. Not a first date, but we did have a guy come into our steakhouse on a Saturday night at 7 p.m. with no reservation. He then told us on the spot he was going to propose to his girlfriend. We had to seat them somewhere awful, it was right next to the bathroom, and when he got down on one knee, looking around nervously, absolutely no one noticed. Him and his GF kept waiting for the rest of the restaurant to see them and go quiet or even clap for them, but not a single person noticed. She said yes, looked disappointed, and they went back to dinner like nothing happened. They must not have minded too much because they came back for their 1-year anniversary, this time he made a reservation lol. Almost 2 hours late, ordered a bit rudely. She paid for him, and they spent less than an hour talking. He wasn't interested in playing a game and didn't really seem interested in his date either. He left early, she stayed a bit to talk with me as I started to clean up. I offered her another shot and drank one with her, and she left all sad. I imagine she was excited for her date and thought the board games bar was a cute, fun idea for a first date, but the guy was so rude being late, and not showing any interest. Just sad. She came back a few times with friends though and was really a nice girl. More sad than awkward, but here goes. For context, I am a woman in a long-term relationship, and was not hitting on the girl or anything. One day this very cute, 20-ish girl comes in, orders, and cheerfully asks me if we have any board games that are great for two people. I worked in a concept bar where we had 700 plus board games you could play as long as you ordered something to drink. I show her a few games, she shows one and sits at a table near the entrance. 30 mn later, she comes and sadly asks me if we have any games you can play alone. I give her one and tells her if her date doesn't come, I'll give her a free shot. Another 40 mn later, she comes back, I give her the shot and we talk a bit, then she goes back to her table to play by herself. It was a busy night, otherwise I would have purveyed something with her. She seemed nice and was obviously sad. The guy ended up showing up. I tell him I'll be right back with the bill and would he like his food boxed up. This fucking guy shakes his head, pulls her plate towards him, and says nope, he's fine to continue eating the meals he's paid for. He stayed for the duration of his meal. My guy. If I had to deal with that, I wouldn't run away with some sad-to-go boxes. I'm finishing and enjoying my meal, and probably getting some dessert after that. I've damn well earned it. In a cafe I worked at a few years ago. A lady who was a regular came in outside of her usual tea time. A few minutes later a dude came in and they introduced themselves. He had coffee, she had tea. Her tea had 12 sugars in it. 2 hours later I think the only time I heard his voice was his introduction. He was asking about the date and I text back saying yeah it was fine. He replies thanking me over and over again and can't believe I'm okay with it. I pull the note out to actually read WTF he's talking about and it is a typed note which has my full name on it. Remember, I met him the day before and never gave him my last name, and it's full of Bible verses, barf, and he tells me he's a second chance virgin and had lost his virginity to another woman, and he's deeply apologetic. He asked that I not try to seduce him to have sex during our relationship. I just text back saying I think he has the wrong idea and had to politely tell him to fuck off since he kinda forced me into a date and that did not imply we were in a relationship. He texts me 2 weeks later asking to hook up before he leaves town. So much for that second chance virginity shit. What for? And he says he just passed gas, weird. But I told him it was okay, everyone does it and I didn't notice. Then, no joke, he leans over and lets out the loudest and nastiest fart I've ever heard. So bad, that people all over the restaurant are staring at us and our waiter just stops in his tracks and turns back to the kitchen. He says oops. It slipped. I asked for the check and said I needed to get back to the dorm. He seemed shocked that I was ending our date so early because he said he was planning on us going to get ice cream, then the movies, then bowling and maybe back out to eat again. I politely decline, and ask to be taken back. As I'm getting out of his car he hands me a note and tells me to text him when I've read it. I take it and GTFO of there. I'm spilling the deets to my roommate when he texts asking is that alright. I'm half paying attention thinking. Said we should eat on campus but he wants to go off campus. He takes me to a nice family dining Italian place, which I had never been to before and found out they serve one large entree for the table. He asks what I want to get for us. I suggested the lasagna, as it's the cheapest thing on the menu and I wanted to go Dutch. Waiter comes and he orders my drink for me, were there bud, I can order for myself, and then gets the lasagna and some chicken tortellini shit, mind you this is supposed to be enough food for 8 people, he scarfs his down and then asks for the rest of mine. Into disbelief I gave it to him and he cleared my plate too. Conversation is totally dead and he can only think to tell me about how he's scared of his 12-year-old sister. At one point I'm looking around the restaurant and when I glance back he's making a really weird embarrassed face, and says he's sorry. I ask. I was the one who had the awkward first date. TLDR had a guy I wasn't interested in show up outside my dorm, take me out and ate both of our entrees, farted so loud that the entire restaurant heard, handed me a note to read after the date that said he was a second chance virgin and I shouldn't try to seduce him. All within a matter of 24 hours of meeting him. Met a guy on my first week at a job where we held events on a college campus I attended. He asked for my number in front of all of his friends. Me being dumb and 18, said yes to save him embarrassment. Next day I come out of my dorm, and he is waiting outside. No idea how he knew where I lived as he didn't text or ask. He says he's been waiting outside for a couple hours to see if I want to get lunch. I say sure so I can at least give him a chance even though I was seeing major red flags. Once again I was dumb and 18. Not me, my friend, there what this young couple, said they were around 15 to 16, the guy was going for a kiss with a full duck face, closed eyes and everything. The girl looked disgusted and terrified in the same time. The best visual is the scene in X-Men where Quicksilver was saving everybody's asses and found that couple on the roof. I don't know what movie exactly but you get me. We had a regular who would always sit in one particular waitress's section every time he came in. He was always by himself, and he would flirt with her constantly. She was fine with it because he was pretty harmless, always came at lunch, tipped well. One day he came in at dinner time with a girl, and they were both dressed up, pretty clearly a date. He still sat in that waitress's section. It kinda seemed like maybe he was trying to show off, or make her jealous. They even bought their own bottle of wine. Well, at some point the date ditched him, that became clear. And then he decided to drink the bottle of wine himself. The bar served him one more drink because they didn't see how FD he was and then had to cut him off when he fell twice. And then he started sobbing to the waitress about how lonely he was. We ended up calling a cab for him. It was quite sad, and we haven't seen him since. Frown. I hope you found love, man, and there's no shame, feel free to come back anytime. I wasn't a server, but worked in a small pet store. Lots of first dates ended up there in the puppy section, being a small town and nothing else to do. One day this neckbeard walks in with a stunner and proclaims it's their first date, unprompted of course. The lady of the hour was letting this little Pomeranian puppy lick the makeup off her cheeks and neckbeard sneaks out and says he'd like to purchase the dog for her. I was like, dude, puppies are a huge commitment, does she really want a dog? He storms in there to say he's purchasing the dog for her as a symbol of his love for her. She responds, my parents won't let me have a dog until I finish high school and get my own place. No lie, he drops to one knee and says move in with me. The absolute cringe shattered the energy of the whole pet store, even the birds were dead silent. She puts the puppy down and stomps off. He turned the deepest shade of red a human can achieve without bleeding, and stumbled out after her. #R.Beard. TL, Dr. Neckbeard tried to buy puppy for a girl on a first date, then invited her to live with him. I'm not a waiter, but I had a friend whose go-to first date spot was the local hibachi place. He once took 3 girls there in the same week. The chef would always do this thing where he would make a heart out of rice and then stick the spatula under it and move it up and down so it was beating. Apparently the third time that week he did it, he looked my buddy right in the eye and gave him the wink and nod during the maneuver. Pretty funny stuff, emo.